Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Thursday morning, June the 9th, and I'm glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open. I did pop the link in there, what we're talking about for the last month or so, probably about 2 months now. Looking at Robert Burney's webpage is from Joy to You and Me, and Robert Burney is he's a codependency therapist, a grief therapist, and he's an author. He's written a book called Codependence, The Dance of Wounded Souls, which I haven't read. I'd like to get a hold of that. And he is a spiritual teacher, and so he's got all kinds of great information here. I hope everybody will check it out. So that's what we're working on right now. That's what I'm interested in looking at and working through my own healing journey here as an adult survivor. And I always say this on every show. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my shows. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a survivor of child abuse, and I wanted to be, and also a secondhand victim of domestic violence, and I really wanted to about that. There are some voices out here. There are people talking about abuse and talking about, the aftermath of abuse and whatnot, but there's not that many. I really wanted to add my voice to those people who are speaking out because I can do it. It doesn't bother me to do it. I know a lot of people, for many reasons, remain silent and really don't feel comfortable talking about abuse. And there's lots of reasons for it, and they're all valid. For me, I had to. Otherwise, I was just going to die. I was just gonna, continually just be on this destructive, this road of destruction in my life. And 4 years ago, when I started my healing journey, I really felt, that I needed to get what happened to me out as a child. That's my inner child saying, don't forget about me, I'm here. And, I realized 4 years ago that I wanted to get into public speaking. So that's why I'm doing these shows. And this show in the morning is my own journey, one child abuse survivor to another. But I usually do night shows, child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us, as well as worldwide epidemic of child abuse and human rights abuses on Saturdays. And I do Mount Bethel Christian Bible Study on Sundays. But I haven't been able to do my night shows just because things have changed in my life. My sweetheart was very sick in the hospital for almost 3 weeks, and I had to move his place, pack his place, and clean his whole apartment, and move his stuff into my place. And so it's been a really busy couple of months. So I have just been doing my morning shows. But I do like to do all of my shows. I hope to be back on my schedule pretty soon, hopefully by July. Get back into doing all of my shows as well as Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. I love doing all the different varieties of the shows, and so thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm not a counselor or therapist. You have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive subject, and many people find it very uncomfortable to even listen to or think about or talk about or even hear about. So you have to know what's good for you to listen to, and if you find my show bothers you or any topic like this, about abuse and violence, sexual violence, anything like that, you need to turn the show off, right? It is your discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission from an adult, somebody who's older, a parent, caregiver, somebody, hopefully you have someone in your life. I know what it's like to not have a parent or caregiver who cares, right? So I completely understand that. And hopefully, if you have someone else in your family that can help you to make a decision whether you should be listening to my shows, a teacher, coach, mentor, who can help you decide whether or not you should be listening. I just believe in protecting children at all times. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. And we're all volunteers, and we're working as hard as we can to promote the safety of children, to save children's lives, to stop child abuse, to child abuse prevention. We're out here, volunteers, all of us, working as hard as we can, with the time that we have. So if you're under the age of 18, I want you to have someone listen to the show with you who's older, who can help you make a decision whether or not you should be listening age appropriately, right? So thanks, everybody. We'll just get right into this this morning. This is from www.joy, Joy, number 2, MEU.com /codependent.htm. And it's Robert Burney's webpage is Joy to You and Me. And this particular portion is a dance of shame, suffering, and self-abuse, the codependent 3-step. And this is the next section of the codependency pages that he has. And Robert Burney, I'd love to get his book, The Codependence, The Dance of Wounded Souls. And one day I'll get a hold of that book, because he's got a lot of excerpts here, pieces from his book. And he says here, A Dance of Shame, Suffering, and Self-Abuse, the Codependent Three-Step. Codependence is an incredibly powerful, insidious, and vicious disease. It is so powerful because it is ingrained in our core relationship with ourselves. And he says, codependency is insidious because it is so pervasive, and the core emotional belief that there is something wrong with who we are as beings affects all of the relationships in our life and keeps us from learning how to truly love. In a codependent society, value is assigned to in comparison, richer than, prettier than, more spiritual than, healthier than, etc. So that the only way to feel good about self is to judge and look down on others. Comparison serves the belief in separation, which makes violence, homelessness, pollution, feeling connected in the scheme of things, not separate. It's quite interesting what he has to say here about all that. He takes a look at not only the individual, ourselves, our individual people, but also the society, society's dysfunctional and messed up ways of thinking and ways of dealing with things. And it's true. I mean, it's very sick. It's a sick society, because we shouldn't be feeling bad. There shouldn't be any of this, this feeling bad, lesser than, no good, I don't count sort of thing, my life doesn't matter. There shouldn't be any of that. That's this whole perversion of this twisted world that we live in. It's really quite unfortunate. But I think we can learn to overcome this stuff. I know that I've learned a lot in the last 4 years just by doing a whole lot of self-help and reading, and also talking to people. I have a lot of friends who are very helpful. They're there for me. They've done a lot of work with healing, and many of them have worked with survivors of abuse, and so they kind of they're very helpful, right? So I've come a long way in 4 years, but some people, and I still have some of this stuff, right? I mean, I still recognize some of these beliefs that, even though I say that I don't judge myself by what the world standards is, of successful or anything else, I still have these feelings of being a little bit lesser than, a little bit more stupid, or whatever it is, whatever the case may be, because of the abuse that was put on me as a child, and the negative messages that my parents gave us all my 7 siblings, and me and my 6 siblings. Actually, there were 7 of us. So yeah, it's kind of, I still probably have some of this, a little bit of low self-esteem, but it's a whole lot better than it used to be, because I used to hate myself. But now I'm learning, and I have learned to love myself, and I'm just now learning how to deal with all that, right? So he says, love is about feeling connected in the scheme of things, not separate. Codependence is vicious because it causes us to hate and abuse ourselves, and we were taught to judge and shame ourselves for being human. At the core of our relationship with ourselves, it is the feeling that we are somehow not worthy and not lovable. So this is what he has to say here. And he says, a dance of shame, suffering, shame, and self-abuse. And he says the reason we have not been loving our neighbor as ourselves is because we have been doing it backwards. We were taught to judge and feel ashamed of ourselves. We were taught to hate ourselves for being human. And he says, if I am feeling like a failure and giving power to the critical parent voice within that is telling me that I am a failure, then I can get stuck in a very painful place where I am shaming myself for being me, being my own perpetrator. That's just so true. I mean, we do this. My mom is gone 16 years in the grave. You know what I mean? And she told me before she passed away, like the year before she passed away, about a year and 2 months, she said she would haunt me to the day I died. Right? Now she told me this because she was angry because I was 29 years old and I was moving to Canada, leaving her. She was so codependent. I mean, my whole family was codependent. We were all so screwed up, and she was very sick, and I needed to get my life. I'd spent my whole life with these abusers, and I had to move. I had to go. I was like, I'm gone. And the abuse, the psychological, mental, emotional abuse was still going on. Even though my parents couldn't beat me up, they were still just as toxic as the days that I was born and that they had me. And so I had to go, and I needed to get myself free, and I ran away at the age of 29, basically, is what I did. So my mother was really angry about this, and she said, I'll haunt you to the day you die, right? Because she knew she was going. She knew everything for my life. And for many years, I mean, I was just like, oh, she was so exactly right. You know what I mean? She's continued to haunt me, through the years, even though she's in the grave 16 years. But every day she haunts me. Her voice and the abuse she inflicted on me, the disdain and the disregard for my feelings, for my body, for everything, for my life. you know. We in doing that, in me allowing myself to continue on in that, really I'm my own worst enemy. You know what I mean? By not being able to put that behind me and say, no, she's gone. I mean, I don't have to listen to her from her that tells me I'm no good or I'm useless or worthless or a whore and a slut and all this other stuff, right? I don't have to listen to that. You know, she's gone, 16 years in the grave. I mean, how long am I going to have to put up with that? But she's so right. She said she would haunt me to the day I died. She was so right. Except for she's kind of wrong now because I've turned it around. And 4 years into my healing journey, I now no longer listen to that inner the critical parent voice, right? But that's just because I'm doing a whole lot of work, right? But you know, she thought that I would continue on in this role that she had put out for me. My parents, both of them. This role they had expected me to play for the rest of my life. They thought I was just going to take their garbage, you know, till the day I died. And I absolutely refused. I mean, 4 years ago, I said, that's it, no more, you know. And this is exactly what he's talking about here. You know, he says, if I'm feeling like a failure and giving power to the critical parent voice within that is telling me that I am a failure. I mean, and that critical parent voice could be anything from our past. It doesn't have to be a parent. It could have been a coach, a teacher at school, you know, anybody who has shamed us and made us feel that we were worthless or you know, not as good as, or that we were just not measuring up, you know, and that we just don't really measure up, we don't belong. And there's so many people who have experienced that. I wouldn't doubt if not everyone has experienced that at some point. And if we just let that get stuck in our minds and in the way we feel in our belief systems, you know what I mean? He says, then I can get stuck in a very painful place, he says, where I'm shaming myself for being, and it do themselves, right? And he says, in this dynamic, I am being the victim of myself and also being my own perpetrator. And that's so true because we're allowing what somebody said 20 years ago or 15 odd years ago or 30 odd years ago to control our decisions, to control our path in this life. And that's what I decided 4 years ago. I was like, no more, no more. You know, I'm going to take control. That you know, all of this stuff from the past is definitely going to have to just take a back seat because I'm going to start, you know, I'm going to start having a good life. I'm not going to allow this to destroy me. And so in order to do that, I'm going to have to work through it. And I knew that. But what I decided to do was stop basing my decisions as an adult at the age of 41, 42, 43, 44 years old. I decided to not base my decisions based on the abuse that I suffered as a child and to get some help, you know. And it's a good thing because it was killing me, and I was suicidal. I talk about this all the time. I had never attempted suicide, but I had planned it my whole life. I had planned all my suicides, and I was thinking, you know, and I'm not going to go into all the different ways, right? I mean, I don't want to do that. But the thing is my family was suicidal. My brothers, two of my brothers killed themselves. My dad was always trying to kill himself running on the freeway at night. My brothers would have to go get him and bring him home and put him in his bedroom and lock the door, like bar the door, you know, from the outside so he couldn't get out. My mom was suicidal. She had two suicidal tendencies, and she was always talking about suicide and killing herself, and that she should have killed us. And my dad was always saying, "You should have killed us, and you should kill himself." And my parents were both suicidal, and they set this pattern of thinking up for us from the time I was born, you know, and because we were no good, we were worthless, we were bad, we were evil. And this is what my parents would say: we're all evil. We're all, you know. My dad would say, "We're all going to hell." And then when he got born again, he'd be like, "You're all going to hell, and I'm going to heaven, and you're all sinners, and you're going to burn in hell. And I should kill you. God would be happy." This is the kind of stuff I grew up hearing, right? And so, you know, it's been hard for me as an adult to try to fit in with society. You know what I mean? Because in my mind, I'm this evil, bad creature who just, you know, deserves nothing but a kick in the ass and a good beating for good measure and a good slap and a good verbal assault. Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me, but my Skype went down, and that's been a couple times this week, actually, that's happened. I don't know why, but it's like a connection between the internet and Skype, and throws everything off. So hopefully I'm streaming, and hopefully you can hear me. But yeah, this is it's pretty sad that so many of us have been through this, and that we become our own worst enemies in this thing. And I know I was self-sabotaging for many years, and not so much self-injuring, you know what I mean? I was doing a little bit of that, but not much. Mostly self-sabotaging, making decisions based on, you know, how I'd been brought up as a child, my belief systems and whatnot, and the fact that, I as a child growing up abused like that, I really didn't feel like I could trust anybody, and so, even that followed me in my 20s, 30s, and even into my 40s and or early 40s, where I was making decisions mainly based at work, jobs and whatnot, quitting jobs and doing things that, because I didn't want to have a confrontation, couldn't handle confrontation. Confrontation to me meant, a violence, right? Somebody's going to get hurt. That's how my parents handled everything, and that's how I handled everything for many years. And so, I couldn't just sit down and have a normal conversation and say, talk about my feelings and whatnot. So I had to really work through that, and I had a life coach actually sort of show me that about a year and a half ago, just before I started doing Blog Talk Radio, actually. I think it was October of 2009. I had quit this job because I just didn't want to deal with this issue that had come up at work, and I was going to go in. I actually quit, but a life coach actually called me from this company and from the job, and they said, well, you can either keep running because I told her, I said, look, I was abused as a child, and I really can't take any more abuse off anybody, and I feel like I'm being, hard done by at this job, and this woman is just like my mother, and I can't handle it. I can't handle her. I can't. I had to take this from my mother. I don't have to take this from a boss. You know what I mean? And so this woman says, well, you can keep running, or you can face it. You can face her, and you can tell her what your needs are, and you can get your needs met. She was very, very cool, and I thought, within a few minutes, she had complete, sort of understood the issues, and she says, you can quit. You still have the power to do that. But she says, you can also get your say in, so that you're not going to continue to run, when you need to get your say in. And as an adult, as a child, you have to take what you take, you have to put up what you have to put up with. You know what I mean? Like, as a child, there wasn't much we could do about that. But as an adult, we don't have to continue on in that. There was many behaviors that I was doing, and still continue to kind of do. And I'm still working through a lot of them. These behaviors that I took on because of the abuse, right? So it's, little by little, right? A little bit here, a little bit there. Over the last 4 years, I've really made a lot of progress, but I still have a lot of work to do. And so I'm trying to recognize and try to see some of these behaviors and allow myself to, kind of work through them. And it's not easy. Sometimes we don't see this stuff, right? But it's good when we do, because then we can say, oh, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I don't allow people in my life, or this is why I cut off relationships really quickly, or whatever. And we kind of have to learn how to set boundaries and do all that stuff, right? It's a lot of work. But he says here, so if I'm feeling like a failure, giving power to the critical parent voice within that's telling me that I'm a failure, then I can get stuck in a very painful place where I'm shaming myself for being me. In this dynamic, I'm being the victim of myself and also being my own perpetrator. And the next step, he says, is to rescue myself by using one of the old tools to go unconscious, which is food, alcohol, sex, etc. Thus, the disease has me running around in a squirrel cage of suffering and shame, a dance of pain, blame, and self-abuse. And that's from Codependence, The Dance of Wounded Souls. So he says, codependence is an incredibly powerful, insidious, and vicious disease. It's so powerful because it is ingrained in our core relationship with ourselves. As little kids, we were assaulted with the message that there was something wrong with us. We got this message from our parents, who were assaulted and wounded in childhood by their parents, who were assaulted and wounded in childhood, etc., etc., and from our society that is based on the belief that being human is shameful. And codependency is insidious because it is so pervasive. The core emotional belief that there is something wrong with who we are as beings affects all the relationships in our life and keeps us from learning how to truly love. In a codependent society, value is assigned in comparison: richer than, prettier than, more spiritual than, healthier than, etc., so that the only way to feel good about ourselves is to judge and look down on others. And comparison serves a belief in separation, which makes violence, homelessness, pollution, billionaires possible. Love is about feeling connected in the scheme of things, not separate. So he says codependence is vicious because it causes us to hate and abuse ourselves. And we were taught to judge and shame ourselves for being human. At the core of our relationship with ourselves is the feeling that we are somehow not worthy and not lovable. So he says in his own story, he says, my father was trained that he was supposed to be perfect and that anger was the only permissible male emotion. As a result, the little boy that made mistakes and got yelled at felt like he was flawed and unlovable. And he says, he's talking about his own story here, he says, my mother told me how much she loved me, how important and valuable I was, and how I could be anything that I wanted to be, but my mother had no self-esteem and no boundaries. so she emotionally incested me. I felt responsible for her emotional well-being and felt great shame that I couldn't protect her from father's raging or the pain of life. And this is proof that I was so flawed that though a woman might think I was lovable, eventually the truth of my unworthiness would be exposed by my inability to protect her and ensure her happiness. So he just took his relationship, that whole thing with his mother, and thought that that's the way it would be with everyone, and especially with other women in his life, or a woman that he would, finally meet and settle down with. So I think it's really quite interesting. He's taken a look at his own situation, his own story, and kind of relating it to it. And I think that's really, that's cool, because that's kind of what I'm doing. But it helps me to see, like that this is not something that I'm alone in. You know what I mean? Like these feelings are valid, and they're it's unfortunate, but so many of us have been through this stuff, and that's why I really wanted to do this show, because I know there's so many people out there. I know myself. I know so many people who have survived all kinds of horrific childhoods, and not only just physical abuse or sexual abuse, a lot of verbal abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse. It's all damaging. It all in neglect. It's all horrible. So he says, for his story, in his particular instance, his mother did tell him how much she loved him and how important and valuable he was, but he couldn't, there was no boundaries, there was no self-esteem. She didn't have any of that, so he felt great shame and whatnot, because he felt he took on the responsibility of her emotional well-being. Well, that's what my parents did. That's what my mother did to all of us, like her children. Like she put all of us in charge of her emotional well-being. So we were responsible. She would make us be responsible for her feelings, right? So if she was down, it would be because we were just these, like my mother wasn't like his mother. I mean, she used to say she loved him and how important and valuable he was, right? My mother was not like that. So anytime she was upset, she'd be like, "It's all you kids' fault, and it's all your father." And she would rant and rave about, how horrible we all were, and we were the cause of her grief, and how miserable she was, and she'd make us feel really bad. And one time, me and my sister my sister was 5 years older than me. I was about, I know the house we were living in and when we moved from there, so I know I was about 6 years old. My sister would have been about 11, and we had to sit at her feet and beg for like 3 days for her to talk to us. So because she wouldn't talk to us, she got mad at us for something that we had done, me and my sister, and so we had to sit at her feet and beg her to talk to us. We had to beg and plead and, "Oh, Mama, please talk to us," and she ignored us for like 3 days and made us feel like dogs, worse than dogs, And I mean, this is the type of thing that people will do to their children if they're screwed up in the head, like if they're not healthy, if they don't have these healthy ways of coping and dealing with things, they'll put this stuff on their children and make their children responsible for their own actions and behaviors, and that's that whole codependency thing. It's absolutely horrific, and so many people, even if they were not abused as children, may experience dysfunctional, type behaviors. It doesn't have to be a violent or abusive home in that regard. So many people have grown up with a whole lot of dysfunction and codependency and stuff like this, and boundary issues, and that's just because their parents or caregivers were not healthy, as far as their mental health goes. So many people are not, and that's the issue. So that's why people keep bringing up generation after generation of children who then become adults and who do the same thing because that's the way they were brought up, and they think that that's the way it is, unless they see something different or decide to see something different and get some help. So many times people just think, "Oh no, this is the way it is," and they wouldn't even recognize those behaviors as being unhealthy. You know what I mean? It's absolutely horrific what this stuff does to people. It doesn't have to be physical abuse or sexual abuse. This type of stuff is so damaging to a person. You know what I mean? A person might go through their whole life saying, "Well, I wasn't physically abused, but I still have all these issues and problems." And it's like, well, or I wasn't sexually abused, but I still have all these things in my life that caused me a lot of problems. And it's so true, because this stuff, this codependency stuff, is so damaging. It's really unbelievable how many people are actually codependent today. And that's why I refuse to be codependent. I'm not doing it. I refuse now that I know what it is. I've actually completely cut it off, and I'm not codependent, and I don't allow anybody to be codependent in my life, right? Because it is a very twisted disease, is what it is. It's a social, it's a mental, emotional, social disease, and I just refuse to be a part of it. Just because I've had to do this, I've had to be a part of it all my life, and I'm just tired. Extremely tired of it, right? So I'm just done with it. But thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate it. We'll have to pick the rest of this up tomorrow, and hopefully my show will stream properly. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with Skype and all that, but I've had some problems with Skype and the internet lately. But hopefully tomorrow will be all right. So thanks everybody for being here. Have a good day. Make sure you reach out. Don't suffer on your own. And like if you're having a hard time, I don't care. If you can't find somebody to talk to and all your friends are at work or whatever, and you're having a hard time coping or it's the middle of the night, you call the crisis line. I don't care. You just do what you have to do. Those people on those crisis lines are there because they want to be there, because they're not getting paid that much money to do that job, and that's a hard job to do. And so they'd be people like me and other people who care and actually really want to help and want to help people to make the right decision and to help you to stick around and get some help, right? So you do whatever you have to do, but you stay here with us, and if you can't cope, you make sure you call the crisis line or talk to somebody, get involved in group support or online group support, whatever it is, right? But make sure you get some help. So take care, everybody, and have a nice afternoon, and we'll talk to you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.